Shalom. Welcome back to B'nai Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And may I ask you, please, can you get some more friends and family to subscribe? And be sure to share this wisdom and inspiration with your friends and family. So I want to take this opportunity to respond to a comment which was on a response to an earlier question that was asked, and that is, what is the definition of sin according to the Torah? So recently I did have a recording, a class, trying to explain a perspective on sin, and the person in the comment actually thanked me for it, but asked me to expound on it. So here, let's just explore, let's visit another perspective, think of what the idea, the concept of sin is. And of course, if we may, I think the best would be to go to the first sin, or I want to say one of the worst, one of the cardinal sins, one that is, so to speak, the foundation, the poster child, if I may, for sin, especially post-revelation of Mount Sinai. And that is the sin of the golden calf. Okay? And you'll see where I'm going with this. You see, what is the idea of a sin? Sometimes, actually, if you look in the Torah, there seems to be some sins that are somewhat odd. It's almost like, why does God have a problem with this? What is his issue, really? I mean, of course, if you're going to kill someone, or steal from someone, or hurt someone, okay, I understand that's a sin. But if I'm just doing something which brings me pleasure, which brings me joy, why does God have a problem with it? Or in certain instances, he does. Of course, this doesn't mean you shouldn't have pleasure and joy. You certainly should. You certainly should have a meaningful and happy life. But you see certain acts where it doesn't seem to be so hurtful, and doesn't appear at least to be so terribly bad. And yet God says, no, I don't want you to do this. And if you do it, it's a terrible sin. You see, the idea of sin is that the person is not thinking about what God wants, but the person is thinking what they want. The person is not motivated exclusively by what is good, so to speak, for God, meaning what is good for the world, and what is good for the world is what God dictates is good for the world, and what God tells us to do, that ultimately is the best benefit for the world. Obviously, whether we see it or not, that benefits the world. And the person is obviously more motivated by what brings them the immediate gratification, what brings them the pleasure, the joy that they believe that they're going to get in that moment, right there, right then. That is the foundation of sin. Look what happened. If you examine the story, how Moses was just a bit late from coming back down to the mountain, you would think the people were under the inspiration, the awe, the effects of what happened not that long before, only 40 days ago. They had the greatest revelation of all time. And certainly they were inspired in the moment. And they certainly had every desire, and they were totally motivated to worship God, and worship God only, and make the world a better place that way. But here suddenly they became concerned, rather even motivated, terribly motivated, by their own need in the moment, by their own weakness. And look what it led to. Look what it brought to. In fact, it brought to such terrible and extensive results that we know that even though in the moment God somewhat forgave them and suspended his reaction to their terrible sin, but we know that the Jewish people have been paying for this throughout the generations, because this sin and the effects of it lingers on. Not only does it linger on from the original sin, but this is all, in fact, all a continuous residual sin that reoccurs over and over again. Every single time a person acts in a bad manner, every single time a person commits a sin, essentially what they're doing is, on some level, even in a more very refined manner, they are committing the sin of the golden calf. Because the sin of the golden calf is basically, I am thinking about myself. I am thinking about what I think is good for me right now, or what's going to feel good for me right now. And I am not thinking about what God wants for me and what God tells me is good for me, and not only for me, but more importantly, for the entire world. So this is just a perspective. And again, I invite your comments. I look forward to them. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear how you feel about this, because really, although we don't get the opportunity to have an actual dialogue back and forth, but because this is mostly a monologue where I just give you a class, I just deliver a thought, but I really appreciate that discussion back and forth, and the means for it is the comments. So please don't hesitate.